Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Ave Maria Press Professional Development Webinar Series. In today's webinar, Katie Prejean McGrady will discuss how we can support and lead young people through quarantine and beyond. My name is Erin Pierce. I am the Parish and Curriculum Marketing Specialist at Ave Maria Press. I would like to recognize our webinar partners, the National Conference for Catechetical Leadership, the National Association of Catholic Family Life Ministers, the National Association for Lay Ministry, and the Catholic Campus Ministry Association. Everyone in the audience is muted today, but you are able to ask questions. Questions may be sent to our presenter using the questions section of the GoToWebinar panel that you see here, and I'll read as many of those questions as possible at the end of the presentation today. Also, the webinar is being recorded, and a link to that recording will be sent to you via email tomorrow. With that, I would like to welcome and introduce our presenter today. Katie Prejean McGrady is a Catholic speaker and the author or co-author of Room 24, Follow, Lent, One Day at a Time for Catholic Teens, and coming this August, Advent and Christmas, One Day at a Time for Catholic Teens. She served as one of 3 delegates for the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops to the pre-synod meeting on young people, faith, and vocational discernment in Rome in 2018. Prejean McGrady also serves as project manager for Ave Explores. Katie, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and make you presenter.
All right, here we go.
There we go.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, so I won't be able to, y'all will see me. I cannot see you when I go into my presenter mode. But I'm excited to be with you all this morning, this afternoon. It's at the afternoon. Time doesn't matter in quarantine, right? We are on day 40, I think 44 over in my house. I got home on March. Uh-oh, I think Erin might not be muted yet. Let's see if she is. There we go. No big deal. March 11th, I got home and have only left for doctor's appointments or the grocery store since. And as an introvert, I was like, I've got this. Quarantine and I will be friends. But then my husband was home and is home from teaching, and the school year is now, completely ended. And my daughter has been home from pre-K2, where she was thriving and loving it. So introvert Katie is still longing for some alone time from time to time, which I think many introverts, everybody just assumes we're doing great, but there's people around all the time. That's not to say I don't love the time with folks, but I think, and we're going to talk about this today, and I'll try to stop touching my face because we're not supposed to do that in this time. But that this time has been taxing and has been, let's just be honest, stressful for everybody. That's not what we're talking about today, but I think it's important to acknowledge that right at the top, and to also thank you for finding the time to watch, to do this, whether it's live or in a recording later on, because frankly, a lot of us are screened out. Because we're staring at our phones, or we're watching Netflix, or we're working from home, so we're constantly on Zoom calls or doing some sort of digital communication. And so the screen has become the forum by which we are talking and communicating all the time, which definitely leads to some fatigue. So with that, you should follow me on your phone screen on Twitter or Instagram, mainly commentary on not just the world, but just in life in general, and photos of my kid. I was just telling Erin before we started the broadcast, we had a little ER visit this past Sunday, which is not something you want to do during a pandemic. My daughter stepped on a piece of glass, like a random stray piece of glass in the crevice of the garage, but she's all good. She's all fine. She got to meet the hospital heroes that we're all praying for. So you can follow us along our adventures in quarantine. My day job and the job that I love the most, and I'm sorry, this is kind of a grainy photo. I stretched it, the Ave Explorers program, and right now we're doing a series on art and architecture. And you can sign up for that series and get the emails and the podcast right into your inbox over at avemariapress.com, or text Ave to 33233. The series, I think, is a great distraction from what's going on in the time of coronavirus right now, but also just excellent content on beauty and art and how it elevates our minds to be in relationship with the divine, and to truly contemplate the things of heaven. I think my favorite piece of all of the Ave Explorer series we have done on mental health, on Mary, on the Synod on Young People, is in this series from a young man that was in my youth group years and years ago, who's about to be ordained a priest. Deacon Andy Derwin wrote about his experiences giving the Scavi tour. So you can find all that information over on avemariapress.com. Now today, what we're going to do in this quarantine, what we're going to do in this webinar on quarantine is twofold. We're going to look at some data, some hard facts and numbers of information that we know about this current crop of young people, Gen Z and millennials, but mainly Gen Z. And that research is all basically coming from two sources, the Springtide Research Institute and those wonderful folks over there. I had reached out to them and we follow each other on Twitter, which is where all friendships really begin. And they sent me this excellent new Belonging, Reconnecting America's Loneliest Generation study that they just launched, as well as their white sheet of some research that they just conducted on quarantine. And so I highly, highly recommend going and checking out the Springtide Research Institute materials that are available. And of course, I always want to talk about my good buddies over at Barna. I love the folks over there as well, and the research that they do, which is both Catholic and non-Catholic, in the looking at just systemic trends, especially amongst young people. And they have a great study that came out about a year ago called Gen Z. It's 125 pages worth of information about the current crop of young people that we find ourselves working with. Now, I'm going to say the term young people again and again and again. What I mean is really like 11, so preteens, middle schoolers, sixth graders, up to 25, 26. And I know that's a massive range, although I'm convinced that we're all just basically overgrown seventh graders for most of our life, but that's another webinar for another day. But when I talk about that age range, we then break that up into the baby millennials and the old Gen Zs, right? Gen Z is documented or kind of, they're the age range of 97 to 2010 to 2012. There's some sociologists disagree about the age, but millennials are not the young people of today that folks might be complaining about who were going to beaches the first week of all of this. Those were Gen Zers, right? Millennials are out in the workforce or losing their jobs in some instances, and have already very much disaffiliated from the faith and are not a lost cause by any means. Millennials are definitely a group that we should be talking about and we should be paying attention to. But today we're mostly going to concentrate our efforts on the current crop of high school and college students who find themselves in the Gen Z group. Gen Z's oldest age would be 23, the youngest 8. So my daughter is not a Gen Z. She's what we call Gen Alpha, mainly because they don't have a fun name yet. I think they're going to be the streaming generation. And I say that mainly because the kids of today, the little kids of today, don't know what commercials are. Over Christmas break, we were up at my in-laws' house in Pennsylvania, and they have cable, and we were watching the news, and a commercial came on, and my daughter thought that the show was over and we could just start watching her show again. And we had to explain to her, no, this is just a promotion for things that none of us need to buy, but we're all going to rush out and get as soon as we can because that's how the world works. So I think they're going to be the streaming generation, the Disney Plus generation. Again, another conversation for another time. I like to look at the nitty-gritty raw data to determine how we move forward with young people. And there's a statistic from Barna that I often cite because I think every generation is snapshotted and captured by what they remember. For the longest time, we can say this with confidence, millennials were defined by, have been defined by, and deeply remember 9/11. We remember when it happened, not just the date, but when in our lives it happened, where we were when it happened, what it made us feel, why we felt unsafe. We remember the real beginning of the 24-hour news cycle. I distinctly remember we never had the television on in the kitchen before 9/11 while we were eating dinner, and then we did for the first few weeks afterwards, and I don't think it ever really turned off after that. I distinctly remember wondering why people hated Americans, and I'd never had that thought in my 7th grade head before. So millennials were very much defined by that moment in our youth, right? Wherever we were on the spectrum, old millennials or young millennials, we remember that. For the longest time, we have said that Gen Zers would be defined by the housing crisis and the financial turn of 2008, because they were either, in the childhood range of like, newborn to 10. And so they would sit around, very much like millennials would sit around watching mom and dad, listen to mom and dad talk about what was going on with the world and the war and 9/11. They were sitting around watching mom and dad talk about paying bills and selling the second car and canceling family vacation. That, I think, is about to change significantly. We can no longer say that Gen Z is defined by the housing crisis of 2008. We're going to have to say that Gen Z is defined by the coronavirus pandemic of 2020. And it's weird to kind of be in the midst of a sociological moment that we're going to be able to define a generation by, because it means that if we know that this is what's going to define their generation, then there's a task that's placed upon us to help them process that defining moment. And helping them process the defining moment is vastly different than telling them what to think about the defining moment or how to feel. And we're gonna talk about this, feel your feelings, and helping young people find the space to feel their feelings as we move on. But with that data, that those awarenesses of what defines the generations, Barna has this really great snapshot of the mark of adulthood. Millennials overwhelmingly say that the mark of adulthood, you are an adult when you are emotionally stable. And Gen Zers have often said that the mark of adulthood is financial stability. Which I think that's fascinating, right? Because is that going to be the same going forward? I think so. I think especially since Gen Z is watching people get laid off, watching millions of people apply for unemployment, watching their school years be completely and totally put on hold, watching their futures for job applications. I was just on the phone yesterday with an old Gen Zer. She's 22. She's about to graduate from college. Well, I guess technically she has graduated from college since the year has ended. She had job interviews lined up in New York, Philadelphia, and DC at law firms. Those aren't happening anymore. Like she thought maybe they would move to a digital format. Nope. She is not eligible to apply any longer. They are not taking interns on, and her future, the way that she was thinking about moving forward, doing these internships in these law firms before going to law school, has completely shifted on it's turned on its head. So we're watching kind of a shift in their future planning happening. With that, some of this data might be a little dated, but Barna hasn't gone and done a study yet, but I still think it's important to look at. Gen Zers, when they were asked, what do you want to accomplish by the age of 30? They said they want to finish their education, they want to start a career, they want to become financially independent. And I see those numbers, I see those answers, and again, I think, okay, well, Gen Z, defined by a financial crisis, remembering that moment in their childhood, of course they want a job. Of course they want a degree. Of course they want to be able to pay their bills without having to call mom and dad for help. But where's God in all of that? Well, becoming more spiritually mature was 9th on the list. That's a problem. That should make us ask, why isn't God more of a priority for this generation? And the question that we have to ask now, while we're looking down the barrel of a vastly different summer of ministry, and we're looking at a vastly different future of in-person gatherings, even if every single sanction was lifted tomorrow, we know that people are still going to socially distance out of an abundance of caution and in some cases fear, rightly placed. So how do we move forward in helping that rise to a higher point on the list when we also recognize that our methods might have to change? Now that requires looking, and some of you who might have come to my workshops in the past, you've seen some of these stats, but I always think it's worth reiterating, right? There are some barriers to faith when it comes to Gen Z. These are the non-Christians, the nuns, the NONESs, the ones who identify as a non-believer, right? This is what holds them back. 29% have a hard time believing a good God allows suffering. There is no doubt in my mind that number is going to increase drastically if this study would be done right now, based on what we know about not only this virus, but what's going on with people's jobs, with depression, with mental health, with abuse. 23% Christians are hypocrites. Not hard to believe that people think that about us. 20% science refutes too much of the Bible. 15% there are too many injustices in church history. 12% I used to go to church, but it's just not important to me anymore. Right? There are Gen Zers who identify as I believe nothing, who were once believers, who are no longer in that category. Probably because they've been influenced by family who's also disaffiliated, because of a secularized world, because of access to things online, because of communities that have formed that have pulled them away from that. We look at these barriers to faith. This is something that's not important to me. What do we see? Well, we see two main things. Suffering doesn't make sense to this generation. And that makes sense to say. We are not a culture. We are not a people that enjoy being in pain or enjoy being inconvenienced. Spend 5 minutes on Facebook or Twitter and we learn that very quickly. Right? So suffering is hard to process. And there's a lack of justice and action, right? When there is a lack of justice, when there is a lack of action, especially in systemically wrong problems, they believe that that's wrong. And if that's not corrected, if that's not taken care of, well, they don't want to be part of that organization, institution, or group because they think that there should have been some sort of response. We especially see this with Gen Zers in relation to questions of human sexuality and always wanting to know. And this is a question I've been asked 1,000 times, and I'm sure you have been too, right? Does the church love gay people? They ask that because they've never heard the right answer, because they've always thought that the answer is no, they don't. And so they see that as a lack of justice. They see that as a lack of love, despite the fact that we're a church that preaches love. So how do we bridge that gap, especially now when we can't spend that in-person time answering that question, when we can't gather together in a youth group and work through that problem of pain and suffering, when we can't go stand with that young person at the funeral of a loved one who's died from this or something else in the middle of this. Now, that same question was posed, right? What's your barrier of faith, to the Gen Zers who do identify as Christian? And this is what keeps them from church. 59%, the church isn't relevant to me personally. 48%, I can find God elsewhere. 20%, I can teach myself what I need to know. 20%, the church is out of date. 12%, the rituals are meaningless and empty. So we look at this and we see believers who still kind of have a problem with how the church operates, whether it's a relevancy, whether it's a, well, I can find them in another place. It mainly seems, and what we see is that the church seems distant and cold, and that they're smart enough to go look for answers on their own, right? We have Google. We can text somebody. We can pick up a book. The church hasn't necessarily been a place where I have felt connected or have felt like I'm in community or have felt like I matter. So why would I participate there? Especially if all I have is a question about some moral issue or a question about demons or a question about whether or not confession is necessary, and I can just go find that on my own, right? We're seeing that the church no longer occupies a primacy of place and is a necessary space for anyone to necessarily walk into, but especially a generation that's never had a problem finding an answer and has never had a problem finding community in other areas of their life that have been completely and totally satisfying. All that research is from Barna and their Gen Z study. Springtide, the Springtide Research Institute, recently did this study on belonging that I mentioned earlier, that you can find over on their website. It's a great printing. Springtide spoke to young people between 13 and 25 about loneliness, about their experiences of loneliness, about their experiences and their feelings of not being a part of something. And here's what they found. 36% of their sample size said, I have nobody to talk to. 30%, I feel completely alone. 43%, I feel as if no one understands me. 33%, no one really knows me well. 38%, it's difficult for me to make friends. Now, I want you to sit with that for a second and think about the young people that you know, that you love, that you regularly talk to or spend time with. Would they have answered the same way? Would they help those numbers go up or go down? Their experience of loneliness shows us that not only do they feel alone, but this should be kind of damning of those of us who work in ministry. There's no one listening to them. It's not necessarily just a matter of there's nobody around, but sometimes even when there are people around, it seems like those people don't actually hear them, are not actually with them. That data, especially in a moment when young people are being quarantined and isolated, when school years have closed, when confirmations have been postponed, when life is on pause and we're not quite sure for how long, those numbers are only going to increase. And we're going to see that in some data in a second. Now, back to the Barna study, the regular church-going Gen Zs had this to say about the church, that the church is a place that they can find answers to live a meaningful life. That gives me some encouragement. 82% that are going regularly think that. Does that mean that there are people there that are listening to them? Does that mean that there are people there that are helping them feel like they are part of the community? 82%, the church has been relevant to me personally. Again, that's encouraging. 77%, I can be myself at church. I can be myself. Not always something you hear about Catholics. 63%, the people there are understanding and tolerant. Again, not always the words used to describe us. So it seems like on the outside looking in, or if they're Christian, but they maybe haven't been in a long time, the church seems distant, cold, no answers, not for me, irrelevant, out of touch, not a place that matters. But the people that are there, the young people especially that are there, are finding a place of belonging and relevancy and be myselfness, and yet at the same time are also still feeling lonely and isolated and as if no one is there to hear them. What are we seeing in all of this? Well, the church is and can be a home where they can be themselves, but then maybe there's a next level that we have to take it to in order to make sure that they are in it, that they are with it, that they are with us, that they are not alone, that they are not left behind, that they are, and this is going to sound really, really cheesy, but that they're not forgotten. Now, let's take a pause for a second and before we go back into some of the data and some of the strategies of moving forward and helping these young people during this time, we all need to be honest about, I think, two things from the get-go. The first is that when all of this quarantine began, many of us, especially in working with young people, many of us immediately, I think this little switch flipped in our head. I know it flipped in mine. Well, if we can't be together for events, we have to do something else to make sure that they know, and this is going to sound remarkably selfish, but I am a selfish person, that they know I still matter, right? My first fear as events began to cancel was that if I'm not speaking at this event in April of 2020, then I'm not going to get hired for an event in April of 2021. That was my first thought. Part of that was fear of income being lost. Part of that was also just the selfishness of I want to remain relevant. And then, and I'm happy to admit, and I think a lot of us, then, like the third wave of it was, well, what if those young people never get the chance to hear that gospel message? And it's taken a few weeks of prayer to kind of reorient the lost income is terrible. And sure, I'm a little worried about the events moving forward, but our first priority in all of this should be the young people who aren't able to go on that confirmation retreat, the young people who are unable to attend that youth conference that they've gone to every single summer that is a launch pad for their year, the young person who is no longer able to come to that weekly Bible study gathering or who is no longer going to daily mass with their grandmother twice a week. Where is that young person going to encounter and experience the love of God, especially if I can't see them face to face? There was a bit of stress involved in coming to that conclusion of my priorities needed to shift from how am I going to stay relevant and in people's faces to how are those young people going to hear the gospel? And I think every youth minister, in whatever capacity we're working with young people, campus ministry, education on a diocesan level, on a parish level, as an itinerant minister, the priority during this time must be, and it has to be, and it takes some humility to admit this, has to be helping young people still feel like they are part of the community, they are part of the church, that social distance does not mean that our souls are distant from God, and that we are still there for them, even if it has to be in this technological different way. Now, all of that to also say, none of us have done this before, right? I almost feel silly doing a webinar about how to walk with teens through quarantine and talk like I'm some sort of expert as if I've done this when I've never been quarantined in my life, when I've never had to socially distance in this capacity, when none of us have ever dealt with a global pandemic, unless we're somebody that survived the Spanish flu of the early 1900s. And if you're doing youth ministry at that age, then good for you. You take over the webinar. I'll shut up now, right? None of us have done this before. And admitting that we are walking in the dark, and in some sense, it's kind of the blind leading the blind, I think is really the only way to have any sort of success. If we act like we have all the answers, and if we act like we know the magic bullet of making sure that these young people stay connected and making sure that these young people feel as if they're still part of the church, if we say that I've got the answers, and I hope that that's not how this webinar description came out, right? If we say that I have all the answers and I know exactly what to do with these teenagers and I know precisely how to lead them through quarantine, and then we are incapable of doing that, not only will it bite us in the butt, but I think it'll discourage us to doing this work in the future. And we really, truly have no idea how long this could last. The state of Louisiana's orders were lengthened to May the 15th. I was talking to some people this morning from Illinois. They're in May the 30th, although apparently some people in Illinois are suing the governor and saying that it's illegal for him to do this, and who knows what's going on. Virginia is till June 10th. California is who knows what's going on over there, right? Everybody's across the country is in a different position when it comes to how long this could last and what this looks like going forward. And if we admit our first priority must be sharing the gospel and helping them know they're loved and that they are loved by Christ, and I love them and want them to know the love of Christ, and I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm going to try my very best, that's really the only way forward. That's really the only way to come up with any sort of plan of how to communicate, of how to stay connected, of how to love them in the midst of this. Springtide did a study, like a live study when all of this began, of 500 young people. Now their age range was more young adult than high school, middle school, but still the data I think is hugely important. And they asked these 18 to 25-year-olds who were in quarantine, okay, well, what have you been experiencing in your quarantine? What's been going on? Who's talked to you? Have people been checking in with you? That was their question. And they were asking this question based off of this loneliness study. They wanted to know, okay, you felt lonely, you felt isolated. Well, now we're quarantined. Many of young adults are living alone or with roommates or trying to work from home or have lost their jobs or went back home to live with mom and dad. That's my sister's situation, right? So are people checking in with you? And here was their answers. 25% of young people have had no trusted adult check in on them during this time. I'm sorry, here comes my 2-year-old. Bye, Rose. Sorry, everybody. So 25% of young people have had no trusted adult check in on them during this time. 25%. I mean, that's a quarter of young people who have not received a phone call or a text message, who have not had somebody reach out and ask them, you know, can I help you in some way, or what do you need, or you know, how can I pray for you? Now, 75% did have adults checking in on them, but overwhelmingly, that was dominantly family and friends. Like 89% of the people who had checked in on this 75% were family and friends. Only 1% of the adults that had checked in were clergy or faith leaders. 1%. Now, I get it. We can't all pick up the phone and call every single parishioner. We can't open up the yearbook and necessarily do a private Zoom call, FaceTime with every senior whose year has just completely and totally ended. But, you know, maybe we can, because we are just kind of sitting at home, right? Those numbers, while 75% of adults checking in is great, where are we in the checking in process? And where are we in helping them stay connected to the parish community and family, and helping them know we don't just serve you on Sunday when you show up to Mass. We don't just serve you when you come to your confirmation class and we literally hand you a bowl of snacks. We don't just serve you on that once-a-year retreat where you get your Jesus high and you walk away. We're here for you even in the midst of the boring drudgery of quarantine, where maybe you're a little scared, where maybe your parents have lost your job, or maybe somebody you love has gotten sick, or maybe you are a little scared about the future. Right? I think what these numbers are snapshotting to us is that we know that young people experience loneliness. We know that young people feel like the church hasn't been there for them, but that when they are part of the community, they do feel as if the church is a home to them. How do we fabricate home? Because it is a fabrication. We're not in our physical church buildings. We're not gathering in the spaces that we're comfortable in for worship. So we have to recreate that experience in some capacity. Young people are looking for 3 things no matter what. This is universal. But especially right now during quarantine, we know that young people are looking for something to believe in. Whether that's hope, whether that's truth, whether that's this is what the church teaches, they're looking for something to believe in, especially in a relativistic world where who knows what to believe and what's actually true. Well, we know the truth. We have a relationship with the truth who gives us the way and brings us to new life. And so how can we articulate what we believe in the midst of quarantine? They're looking for community. They're looking to belong. They're looking for safe places. And I know that that's a bit of a taboo phrase, but they're looking for people that they can cling to and turn to and be honest with. Why is it that Snapchat and TikTok are the most used apps of the Gen Z generation? It's because on those forums, they're able to share themselves, oftentimes in kind of a silly, goofy, very unfiltered way. And people respond and people share and people laugh and people message, right? They're looking for connection. So how do we maintain connection, not just in a digital way? And I'm not talking like in the old school way of putting cars 6 feet apart in a parking lot, but truly, how do we foster a sense of community when we know that they can really find it anywhere they want? But we need to make sure that they come to find it with us so that there's a life-giving aspect to the community. And lastly, young people are looking for mission and purpose. And they're looking for this anytime, but especially if they're stuck at home, they can't go out and get a job. They can't necessarily go hang out with their friends. Prom has been canceled. They're not going to get to walk at graduation. They're not going to necessarily get to say goodbye to their favorite teacher. They don't know what the summer's going to look like. And maybe they had an awesome internship or a job or a camp they were going to. How do we give them renewed mission and purpose in the midst of your home, your distance learning? Hopefully we'll see you in the fall if you're going off to college. Hopefully our school year will kick back up in mid-August like it would normally. How do we give them a sense of, I have something to do, not just to be busy for the sake of busyness, not to just learn a new language because we want to keep them twiddling their thumbs, but really, what is it that this time can provide for you? So to teach them the truth, to maintain community connections and to maintain life-giving friendships that show them the church is still there for them. And how do we show them the fruitfulness that this time can present and provide by looking towards mission and purpose that's easily articulated? I think it's done in 5 ways, and this is where we get practical. So thank you for sticking with me. Again, I apologize for the bust-in of the toddler, right? A 5-fold approach to walking with teenagers in the midst of quarantine. This is why you signed up. First and foremost, it takes reaching out. Now, this is going to sound really almost kind of silly, and I didn't, this is not rocket science, but reaching out does not mean a blanket flock note text message, does not mean a post on Instagram stories telling people, hey, we're doing this thing, you should watch it. But individual, personalized, intentional text message, phone call, FaceTime, card in the mail, reaching out to an individual young person and asking them a couple simple questions. How you doing? Now, their first response is going to be fine, because that's what teenagers say, and that's what we all are hardwired to say. But then, hopefully, you have a relationship with this young person, going a little bit deeper and saying, okay, no, but really, how are you? I know graduation was canceled. How are you? How are you handling that? I know that home can kind of be frustrating and annoying right now, and your mom is probably riding you to make your bed and get out of bed before noon and do your schoolwork, right? How are you doing? Personal, individualized, reaching out, not just because it's our job as a parish employee or as a diocesan employee or as somebody who's working in ministry, but because that young person thrives on being heard and seen and known and loved. Tommy and I, my husband and I, we were teachers at a Catholic high school, and those students are seniors this year. Our last year there, they were freshmen, now they're seniors. And I was so looking forward to going to their graduation, and I have tons of their invitations that have been mailed even in the midst of quarantine, sitting on a stack on our kitchen table so I can write them their cards and send them the gift that I send every senior that graduates. And I told Tommy the other day, I said, I think for every graduation card that we get, I'm going to try to reach out to that teenager, whether it's, sometimes I don't have their number, whether it's through an Instagram message where I also copy their parents, or I send them a personal email, or in some cases there are babysitters, so I do have their phone number, to ask them that, to reach out, not with an agenda, not necessarily with, look, I want you to come to this Bible study when we get back together again, when things are open, but to check in. From that, reaching out in personal ways, right? The phone call, the text message, the email, if we're going old school, I guess email would be considered old school. We can then kind of move to the next level, which would be to organize and to create gatherings of young people. Now, many youth groups, and I think this is valuable and good, are doing, group Zoom calls where there's a link and they can hop on and everybody kind of Zooms together for a little bit, almost like these happy hours that have been happening. But I've been finding more and more that the larger the gathering in a digital space, the far easier it is for a young person especially to hide, to not actually share, to not actually talk. I mean, this is the same principle of your small group should be 6 to 8, not 14 to 18, right? Not the age, the number of people, right? 6 to 8-year-old small group might be fun, who knows? Elementary, middle school ministry, that's always middle school ministers go straight to heaven, I'm convinced of that. But these gatherings of young people in a digital format, a digital space, creating this small group model as best we can in a digital format, and gathering together with purpose, right? There's a difference between, hey, we're going to hang out, we're going to talk, And hey, we're going to hang out. We're going to talk about the Sunday gospel. We're going to have a couple time, an opportunity to share highs and lows of the week, right? To have pointed and purposeful gatherings rather than just saying, oh yeah, we're going to hop on the Zoom call. We're going to do this group FaceTime. We're going to watch this Instagram live. And I'm saying that there needs to be purpose to these gatherings because, again, and I mentioned at the top, there has been so much screen fatigue. There has been so much stuff that has been thrown in their faces that they're beginning to get a little zonked out. They're beginning to get a little glassy eyed. They're beginning to get a little, I don't want to do another thing. And especially as distance learning has ramped up in some places now that the school years have been shut down, these gatherings of young people need to be intentional gatherings. You as the youth minister, and listen to me very clearly, you as the youth minister are not responsible for doing every single gathering with the young people, small groups that you create. You have a team, hopefully of volunteers. You have adults that have been hopefully helping within your parish context or diocesan context and community. Empower the adults that you have worked with before to help you in maintaining these relationships with young people, or you are going to make yourself 1,000 times busier in quarantine than you ever were in real life, on the ground ministry in person. And when we go back to normal, whenever that is, you will be burnt out and destroyed and never want to talk to a teenager ever again. So give yourself permission to find people to help you reach out and create and establish these gatherings. Now, I say this next one almost hesitantly because I do think we have over-contented and there will continue to be content creation in the life of the church right now. It took a global pandemic to put us online, but here we are. But providing life-giving, curated content that you know your young people will benefit from. There's a difference between saying, hey, watch this global gathering with this talk, and going and finding a homily from a priest over the weekend that you want your young people to listen to, and then you send them 3 discussion questions that they can talk about with their friends. There's a difference between saying, hey, we're all going to watch this Instagram live together, and watching the Instagram live and sending them the link and then having conversations after, or giving them a chapter of a book to read, right? Creating content that you know isn't just mass produced because we're trying to fill the airwaves because we're all home and worried we won't be relevant, but content that will actually help them. I'm especially thinking of our seniors at this particular moment who find themselves with a school year that's been canceled, with graduation that's pending, or just outright it's not happening. It'll happen in a digital format. You'll show up at school one at a time, take a picture with the principal, and we'll put a slideshow up on the internet, right? That's not going to be life-giving to them. That's going to just put some salt in the wound, and they're going to hurt a little bit more and miss what they had. So how can you create, produce, or give them something that you know will speak to your young people in your certain situation? So giving content, not just because we want to fill the gap and the silence, but because we know that they are looking for something right now to give them a sense of mission and purpose. There's a group of young women here in my diocese. They formed their own little Bible study. They're using a Blessed Is She Bible study study, I guess that's what it is, just a Bible study, an outline together. They're meeting once a week, they're Zooming together, and they picked the certain Bible study that they did because of the topic. They figured it was relevant for this particular moment. There's only about 8 or 9 of them in the group, and they meet once a week, and it's very, very life-giving to them. On the flip side, there's another group of some young girls and from the high school group that I know, and these kids that I've worked with before, and they wanted to gather together as well. And so they get together after watching the Project William live, and they talk about that, right? 2 completely different approaches, 2 different adults that took the lead with these young people to give them the opportunity to gather and to meet, but content nonetheless. Some of those young people want to go deep dive into scripture and do this Bible study. Some want to watch the talk and talk about it together after the fact. It's content that's curated because you have done due diligence to find what you know will work. This, of course, then leads to that the 4th kind of movement, which is follow-up, which is you've reached out, you've made sure that they know that you're there to pray for them, and you're continuing to reach out on a regular basis. You've created these opportunities for gatherings and for small group community, and you're giving them things to both do and to read and to look at, and making sure that they're staying connected. But the biggest thing that we're finding, and it says this in the Springtide Research study, is that young people are not lacking in their faith right now, so much as worried that nobody remembers them. It's not so much a matter of, oh yeah, it's I don't believe in God anymore. That's not the problem. It's I don't know if anybody else that believes in God knows that I believe in God. So on Sunday, after masses are being streamed, are you reaching out then? Are you following up with them after they've hopefully had some spiritual experiences and some spiritual feeding within this time of quarantine to make sure that they know that you're still there? You're not just calling them to check in because I told you to do so, but you're calling them to check in, you're sending that letter, your carrier pigeon, whatever it is, however you're communicating with them, you're following up after they've received some of this formation to see where they are. It'd be no different than you say hi to a kid on the first day of school and you continue to say hi to them in the hallways every time you see them. Or the young person who comes to Bible study the first week and comes back weeks 9, 10, and 11, and you find out, hey, where were you weeks 2 through 8, right? How are you doing? What's going on? This last kind of movement, after we follow up in a consistent way and kind of go back through that reaching out, gatherings, content, experiences with young people, is the above and beyond. Is the how do we make any of this time not just fruitful, and again, it might sound cheesy, but special, right? What can we do to give them the boost of joy that many of them are looking for? I opened up my Facebook this morning before I'd even gotten out of bed because I'm a millennial and I'm addicted to my phone. And the Catholic high school in town last night, some of the teachers got together, separately, of course, and they all had signs and they went and put them in the yards of the seniors. Just a simple sign that says a St. Louis senior lives here, Saints marching on, and had their name, and there was a little goodie bag left on their front porch, something to celebrate them because their graduation is canceled and might happen in August, maybe, right? Something that showed, hey, I love you. I'm not just calling. I'm not just giving you a video of a Father Mike Schmitz talk. I'm not just sending you some small group questions that we can talk about on Zoom later, but I'm going to go out of my way to show you that I care. And I'm going to speak from experience in this. So like week 2 of quarantine, my husband and I came to the realization that if this goes on like we expect it will through most of the summer, even if numbers begin to dip, that social distancing is still going to be in place in a lot of areas and things are going to look vastly different. I'm pregnant right now. He's not able to come in with me to the appointments. So he won't get to see any ultrasounds, like other than, pictures or videos that I take. And sure, it's kid number 2. So like we've done this before, but still it was a weird thing to realize. And it was also a weird thing to realize that if all my summer events get canceled, maternity leave is going to look drastically different in the fall. And so that was kind of a weird hump to get over mentally. And all of us, young people, old people, everyone in between, every single one of us is dealing with weird things coming at us. And so if I'm dealing with a weird thing on Monday, but you're not dealing with a weird thing until Friday, how can we love each other in the midst of that week to help each other through those weird moments of sadness and grief and frustration and disappointment and anger, and really just working through our feelings? And so my good friend Hope Snyder, she's a great lady. I taught her daughter Allie at St. Louis. A few weeks before all of this began, she and I bumped into each other at a bakery, and she picked up the tab for my daughter and I's milk and cookies. And she was like, do you come here every Thursday? I was like, yep. Thursday is Rose's Friday because they don't have school on Friday. So anytime I'm in town, we come get, cookies and milk at this little bakery. So week 2 of quarantine, and we're both kind of in this weird little headspace of struggling with like what the future is going to look like and how difficult could this pregnancy actually be because you can't come into the room and all this stuff. I get a text message from her, hey, I'm going to swing by with a gift later today. Don't worry, I'll leave it on the front porch, and I'll let you know when it's there. And sure enough, a few hours later, she swung by and she brought a little Easter basket of gifts and goodies for Rose and a pack of sugar cookies from this bakery with some chocolate milks and these really cute like Easter towels. And she said, I just wanted to give you something to let you know that I love you and I'm thinking about you and that I know that this is a weird time. And we had not indicated anything to her at all that we were kind of both really struggling with this in the second week of it. She went above and beyond to show us some care. I know that many of us are looking at a lot of young people that need our attention and our time. But is there a way that you can mobilize some volunteers and some adults within your community to especially go above and beyond for the young people right now who are dealing with a lot? Teenagers do not have a prefrontal cortex. That means that the decision function of their brain is developing. And for the entire school year and for college, right, the decision function has been manufactured in some sense. Your muscle has grown in such a way to where you know what class you're going to, and you know what homework you have to do when, and you know what you're going to be doing after school for this extracurricular, and that just all paused, just all stopped. including maybe the anchor that youth ministry and youth group stuff was for them. And so in the midst of dealing with everything that's going on in the world, they're also having to completely restructure that decision function of their brain. Reaching out and gathering together in small groups and providing really wholesome and life-giving content and following up, those are great things that we have to do to make sure that they know they're not alone. But what is something special that we can do to show them that we love them, to really help them recognize that we still care about them, that we miss them, and that they're in our hearts. It might not be the same thing that Ms. Hope did for us randomly. It might not be signs in the yards of seniors. You know your young people. But what is a way that you can go above and beyond to show them love and care at this time? So with that, and as usual, I ended up talking probably way too much. I'm going to stop showing my screen. Hopefully you had enough time to write some of those notes down, and we're going to open it up for some questions. I'm going to drink some water.
Katie, thank you so much.
Of course.
As you ended on this idea of going above and beyond, I encourage anybody who's on with us right now, maybe you can share some of those things that you've already done that would fit that category, going above and beyond for the young people in your life. And a couple things that, just to continue, a couple things that led to some questions as you were talking, Katie. First of all, some people wanted to know when you talked about how Gen Zers placed God at number 9 on the priority list. Do you have other lists of generations of people to compare that to?
So the Barna study shows millennials in comparison to Gen Zers. Millennials the spiritual priority was 6, Gen Zers it was 9. There is a lot of Pew research, and I would highly recommend, and it's actually free right now. I did a masterclass course for Revive parishes on Gen Z and millennials, where we go into a lot of the Pew research, that the disaffiliation numbers have doubled from millennials to Gen Z, whereas they'd only about a third jump from millennials from Gen X to millennials. So that we're seeing a faster rise in disaffiliation with these younger generations, which if there's about 14 to 15% of Gen Zers do not believe in God, have no faith whatsoever, are non-religious, non-believer, atheist agnostics, that number, if that trend continues, if we went from a third higher to half higher, that we're going to see 25 to 30% of my daughter's generation will not be believers. So if, and we're all thinking about curves and flattening curves, if the only way to flatten the curve of disaffiliation is to bring young people into an experience of church that is community centered and oriented towards relationship, not just facts, that's really going to be the only way that we flatten that disaffiliation rise.
Okay. Also, another thing that led to several people sending in little messages was when you were talking about, reaching out to the kids, and that a lot of them are prohibited based on safety, safe environment regulations of their diocese. They can't text them without a parent being, included or on that. What are your thoughts on all of that?
Yeah, so a few years ago, our diocese did something, and it was precisely because teenagers tend to be more open to sharing when they know that mom and dad aren't listening, for better or worse, right? And that, I think about my own self as a 30-year-old. If I need advice on something, I might ask my mom, but I might also go ask my best friend, because that's just how we're hardwired. And so at the beginning of every year, we created a form where the parents gave consent for the youth minister and a core team member to group text young people. So there were always 2 adults included in the conversation. The parents had given consent, had written consent that we were allowed to communicate with them in a digital format if there were 2 adults. And that was kind of our free pass to be able to reach out to teenagers. It's not a perfect solution, but I think especially right now, because we are looking at a vastly different future when it comes to having to communicate via technology, that those conversations need to be happening, especially within parishes. On a diocesan level, I'm not quite sure what dioceses are planning on doing, but if you can have a conversation with your pastor about, look, can we reach out to every mom and dad and get consent to be able to reach out to these young people in a personal format, I think that might be the path forward for some, but always including 2 adults because of safe environment.
Sure. Right. Okay. Let's see. Um, some people, some of the things that they're doing. Carrie says tomorrow she's bringing little bags of Easter goodies to
Oh,
students
thank
filled with
you.
some candy. Um, let's see. So Neil said, I'm responsible for both adult and youth catechesis and evangelization for my cluster. Should we employ a similar approach in our ministry to our adults?
I mean, I think so. Again, I think we're all just overgrown 12-year-olds. I think with adults right now, one very practical thing that I've seen some parishes do is that father takes the lead on making the personal phone call or the reaching out. I know that when my pastor, who's a family friend and has my cell phone number, when he called me, I felt like $1,000,000 because it was like Father Danny misses me, you know. So I think really employing the same tactics of helping adults know that we still long to be close to them and that we haven't just completely taken them for granted or forgotten. It's not like any of us don't want to be with our church community. So yes, I do think. I think another thing is to practically, there are a lot of adults right now who are hurting both financially, that are unaware of what the future could look like when it comes to retirement. Like I know that conversation has been happening amongst people my parents' age because the stock market has taken a dip, and so just and not the church needs to necessarily be the one to solve those problems, but I have found it slightly grating to see watch our live stream, donate here in the same breath, where it's like I wish that we could maybe recognize that there's a lot of financial hurting, and maybe just put a pause for a second on immediately asking people to give when they might not be able to. Now that's maybe I'm just on a soapbox because I saw it earlier today, but I think with adults we need to be a little nuanced in the way we approach them, if that kind of makes sense.
Definitely. Tammy says we are randomly drawing one middle school teen and one high school teen each day and dropping off their favorite Sonic drink to their front
Oh, that's
porch.
awesome. That
Yes,
is genius.
that's getting to what they love, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Susan
I could totally
said,
go for cherry limeade right now.
that's right. Susan said we had someone organize and adopt a senior list where people in our community are doing special things for these seniors.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's great.
Yes. And we also have some questions regarding the two studies that you mentioned.
Mhm.
Can you give us that information one more time?
Yes. Yeah, so Springtide Research Institute, the website is just springtideresearch.org. Highly, highly recommend them. Sorry, my notifications somehow got magically turned
Okay.
back on. So Springtide is definitely focused more on, I think, the millennial and Gen Z experience. Barna is very much just a wide-ranging research institute that does tons of work. And the two studies that I always go back to, so their belonging study from Springtide and then the Gen Z study from Barna. Both are available for digital download or for purchase in hard copy.
Okay, great. Thank you. Um, we had a question early on. I was trying to find the person's name. Um, regarding, she said as a youth minister, she's used to connecting with the kids when they come to mass every Sunday, but
Mhm.
not seeing them now. Um, any thoughts as to another ways to connect?
Yeah, so the Diocese of Indianapolis, Archdiocese of Indianapolis, had an idea pretty early on. I think they're doing it the narthex. So they have an open Zoom call every Sunday after their parish's live stream goes up, and people can hop in. And then, I mean, Zoom I know is kind of controversial, so use whatever format you want. But if you do have a paid Zoom account and people can jump in on the parish, then you can break off into groups. And so, like, young people can go into a breakout room, and maybe the women's ministry can go out into a breakout room, and they've been doing that to kind of, because that's huge, right? Like saying hello to people. I think that's one of the arguments that folks are making for parking lot masses is even if we are in our cars away from each other, seeing one another is hugely important. So let's use the technology that we have, do a narthex, do a group FaceTime, do an Instagram live where, and on Instagram live, and I'm sure you all know this, if you go live, somebody can request to join your Instagram. So maybe you bring on a different teen every Sunday to share with you, and then other people can be watching on Instagram Live what they heard in the homily and like what they loved about it. 5 minutes, just so that everybody can kind of talk. And like as people are jumping in on the Instagram Live, you can see their names and they can comment. So just find a way to maybe connect immediately after that Sunday live stream. On one hand, you might get them to actually live stream it. On the other hand, it might give them a chance to then get to talk and communicate together.
Absolutely. Noelle asked, do you have a list of resources where one can find curated content that are effective in engaging the youth, especially in these times?
Yeah, so there's my top 3, Project YM Live, that's been going on every Sunday. If you just go to the Project YM, I think it's projectym.com/live, all of those backlog talks are there. Paul Kim, Father Mike Schmitz, myself, I believe Jackie and Bobby Francois did one, or maybe they're doing one. Maybe I just shared that information I shouldn't have. But there's about 7. I think there's been 7 Sundays, so there should be 7 talks there, each about 15, 20 minutes long. The same thing, Life Teen has been doing their global life nights. I don't know if that stuff has been saved online, but they're every Sunday at 5 o'clock Central. And so those have been very, very high quality, using speakers, using Life Teen staff. The other thing is, and there's like a lot of stuff that's being created actively during quarantine, but there's also just such great content that's already available all the time online. I got a message from somebody the other day that she did a deep dive into women's sessions of Steubenville conferences from last summer, and she watched every women's session that was on YouTube to compare them. And I was like, okay, well, who was your favorite? Like, tell me, give me some feedback. But there's hundreds of hours of Steubenville talks just available on the Steubenville Youth Conference YouTube page. Pick one, listen to the talk, write 3 small group questions, and send it out newsletter style or text message style, or post it on your Instagram. Because that's the thing, there is so much content that it's like it's decision fatigue when you open up Netflix. I could watch 30 different news shows, but I'm probably just going to go back to season 5 of The Office because that's my favorite. So when it comes to young people, like, yeah, they could watch all these new talks, but they don't know where to go find them. So they're probably just going to go watch the same Father Mike Schmitz video that they saw when they were a freshman in high school. It's probably a great video, but they probably also could love some other things that he and other people have created. So I would start in those 3 places. And then also, like, yeah, they can watch a national speaker, but they know you. Put yourself in front of a phone camera and record a 5-minute message of hope and send it to them. And I guarantee they'll probably love that far more than seeing my face because they don't know me. Those would be my tips.
I love that. Jacqueline said, congrats on baby number 2.
Thanks. Due September 26th, or if I have a
Yay.
family the week before. So
My question is, what about the teens we want to check in on that we do not have a personal connection or relationship with? How can we do so without seeming ingenuine?
Yeah, so that's the unchurched right now are going to be our biggest challenge. I would say, and this is maybe it's going to sound counterintuitive, but we got to get to the parents. At this particular moment, like you said, it would maybe seem ingenuine if the kid that's only ever been forced to come to confirmation class is starting to get these random text messages from us checking in, and all they're ever saying is fine. They might not want to engage because we don't have that long-standing relationship. So if there can be maybe an avenue in with mom and dad, providing some faith content for mom and dad, helping them better witness to their faith within their home life, then that could be the path to getting that young person connected. There's also, too, we should never, ever discount the power of the Holy Spirit. We might think that we're annoying them, or we might think that they might not like us reaching out to them. And maybe they're just not a big texter, Facebooker, or Instagrammer, but they're actually really appreciative of whatever they're receiving. This is where the personal reaching out is very, very important. But I also think a mass newsletter with the curated content, or a huge Instagram post that they would all necessarily see at once because they follow the page, could still be good, because you will reach the ones who might not be engaged with you personally.
Narianne said, and I hope I pronounced that correctly, one of our youth group members died last Saturday. His mom is a parent volunteer, and his sister is very involved in the youth group. The youth are asking how we can console the family. I cannot actually give a specific way. What can we tell them? We will do Zoom prayer this Friday. I'm sure they're all grieving.
Yeah, so I can't even imagine how, because people can't gather, you can't come to the wake, closure is really, really hard. I know that when we've lost family members in the past, and it's been a long time since I have, but cards in the mail, weirdly enough, like even the cheesy sympathy cards in the mail, just are a nice reminder that somebody thought enough to spend 50 cents and go to a store and get a card and put it in the mail for me. So I would say maybe have every young person write a card, send a card. Obviously, don't send them to the store. I would recommend inkcards.com. It's an app, and you can do it on your phone. It's $2 for a postcard, and it pays the postage already. So you just do it straight from your phone, and they have tons of, I mean, they've got Mother's Day cards all the way down to like sympathy grieving cards. And just to maybe coordinate a schedule, like don't all text them at once and say, hey, everybody send a card so that they get them all next Friday. But like 3 people each day, this is the day that you mail a card, so that they kind of come in waves, and this family really feels that comfort the same way that they would feel the comfort of people coming in waves to a wake. That would be my recommendation.
That's a great idea. Excellent. All right. Well, our time is running out here, but I just really thank you, Katie, for sharing your insight and reflections and expertise with us, and for everybody who sent in questions and comments. We greatly appreciate that. We did want to offer you a discount, as we do on Katie's 4 books, using webinar 0428 for today's date, 20% off. And the Advent and Christmas one, you can pre-order now. It's coming out in August. I will be sending you an email tomorrow with a link to the recording. You can always find the recordings on our website at avemariapress.com, as well as on YouTube, Vimeo, and Vimeo. All right. Well, please mark your calendars for next Tuesday. I'm continuing on the theme of helping young people. We have 2 student ministry directors from the Church of the Nativity in Timonium, Maryland. Daniel Miller and Allie Partially are going to share how to use these moments of crisis to help people really grow in their trust in Christ and the church. So thank you again, everybody. Have an excellent day, and we'll see you next week. Bye-bye. Thanks, Katie.